On this episode of Live Open Daily, we take a look at Meta's latest attempt to get you back in your headset with free game weekends, but you gotta read the fine print. Also, if you can't afford the full price of a new Quest 3 up front, well now you can finance it. I'm your host Live Open Mike, and if you're of a certain age, you might remember a little company called Blockbuster Video. When I was a kid, my brother and I would get taken to Blockbuster every weekend by one of my parents, either my dad or my mom, and we would pick out whatever new game we wanted for whatever system we had at the time, whether that was like Super Nintendo, N64, Sega Genesis, Saturn, whatever. So we would grab the new release, take it home, and just spend the entire weekend topped up on like Mountain Dew or root beer or something like that, just grinding as much of the game as possible before it went back Sunday night. I thought that's what this was gonna be until I read the entire blog post. This news comes from a blog post from Meta titled "Try out Breachers and Racket Club for free this weekend." This summer we're introducing free weekends because it's hot out there and everyone can use a little extra entertainment, right? Every weekend through August 12th, that's 5 weekends for those who are counting, we'll be giving you temporary free access to 2 acclaimed multiplayer games on Meta Quest, so you can try out something new with your friends. And hey, if you like it, maybe pick up a copy to keep. The inaugural free weekend kicks off this Friday, July 12th at 3 o'clock. That's my local time. I live on the East Coast of the United States, and runs through Monday, July 15th at 1 a.m. During that period, you'll be able to access 1-hour trials of both the hit tactical shooter Breachers and the one-stop shop for all things paddle sports, Racket Club. Breachers is a team-based shooter that requires quick wits and quicker reflexes. By the way, this game is from Triangle Factory because they didn't bother to list the developer anywhere in this blog post. As an enforcer, your goal is to breach the opposing team's defenses, sweeping room by room, clearing corners, and working as a team to down enemies and disarm their bombs. Conversely, as a revolter, you need to survive the onslaught, blocking doors, catching opponents unawares with trip mines, and desperately trying to run out the clock. It's a tense game of cat and mouse close quarters combat. Racket Club, meanwhile, is fun in the sun without the actual sun. From Blaston and Demio developer Resolution Games, Racket Club offers an all-new made-for-VR sport that captures the magic of pickleball, tennis, paddle, and ping pong, but in the comfort of your own home. Focus on skill building in career mode or compete against players around the world either solo or in doubles matches. Looking for something more relaxing, you can always hang out courtside and watch others sweat it out. If you play and enjoy either Breachers or Racket Club for long enough, you should receive an email with an exclusive 20% off code that will let you pick up a permanent copy of the game at a discount. These codes are valid for up to 5 days after the free weekend ends, or in other words, through July 20th, 2024 at 1 a.m. local time. You can pre-download Breachers and Racket Club now so you're ready to go on Friday when access unlocks. Don't forget to share the event with your friends in VR or through the mobile app so you can all set up a time to hop in and play together. Remember, this free weekend runs through Monday, July 15th at 1 a.m. But if you miss your window, we'll be back with another free weekend and 2 more games next week. Keep an eye out. That is the end of the blog post. So to me, this is Meta again doubling down on the fact that they realize they have a major retention problem with their headsets. And while Mark Rapkin, an executive at Meta, says that the retention for Quest 3 has been better than Quest 2, a program like this kind of tells me that they're still not getting the results they hoped for in terms of like gameplay sessions and people who bought headsets putting them on frequently. Hell, I'm an enthusiast and a content creator. I'm also a community manager for a developer, and there have been days that I don't put my headset on because I don't have a direct compelling reason to do so. I didn't have to shoot anything for work, and there wasn't a game that I was like itching to try or jump back into. So I understood the idea behind this, but what stood out to me most about this is the 1-hour trial. If your game is on the main Meta store, this before AppLab goes away next month, you have access to a program called Try Before You Buy. This is where you could allow people to download your game for a 15-minute or a 30-minute period before the game would cut off and then kick them back out. That's different than putting out a demo of your game on like Quest, Steam, Pico, whatever, because that's actually a completely separate build and it's a separate entry on the store that people can go to and download. But at that point, you're maintaining 2 separate builds. If there's a bug in the demo, but it's not in the main game, you have to go fix the bug for the demo, and there's resource management issues with that. This sort of time lock download is actually better because you're downloading the actual full game and then it just locks you out after your 15 minutes or 30 minutes, or in this case, an hour if you've already played the full allotment of time. So from a developer standpoint, it's better because you're not having to maintain 2 separate builds. Also, if you look at the refund policy on like Quest and Steam, it's generally 2 hours of gameplay before you're not allowed to request a refund anymore. I know dozens and dozens of VR people, and really gamers in general, if they're playing on Steam, who will play a game for like an hour and a half and then decide on whether or not they're going to do a refund for it. This feels really similar to that, and really in most VR games, not all, but in most VR games, especially multiplayer games, within the hour you've already gotten a pretty good feel for the game. You know what kind of like cosmetics or like grinding you're looking for, or any kind of upgrades you can do, and you've generally got a pretty good flavor for the game. So in the case of these 2 games, for instance, Racquetball and Breachers, I've actually never played Breachers, but I've seen a lot of gameplay for it, The game loops on that are anywhere from like maybe 5 to about 15 minutes. I rarely see a match go over 15 minutes just because of how rapid the gameplay goes. Breachers is akin to something like Rainbow Six Siege, and those aren't long gameplay sessions. Racquetball, which I have played, is something very similar. I don't think a setup for this will work for a game like, let's say, Demeo, which you need like 2 or 3 hours to run through a full level of that, because you're only going to be able to get through the first floor, if even that far. I've had first floors of Demeo take me well over an hour to do. And at that point, you're not getting like the full gameplay experience because you're not seeing the shop, you're not seeing the boss fight, so on and so forth. The other thing I found interesting is the limited time promo code you get after that. Just to review that in case you missed. To review that in case you forgot, after you play the game for the full hour, you'll get an email with a 20% off code, and that code expires in 5 days. So that kind of puts you on the clock to whether or not you want to pick up the game or not. This is interesting because it's just 20% off, whereas like a Meta referral, for instance, is 25% off. I've started to see some things in Discord, and I actually experienced this myself with a referral I sent to someone I met in the Discord, where referrals are being limited to only like 3 uses now as opposed to like unlimited. And I've actually seen some reports on people saying that they have been limited to only a certain number of referrals a month. So it feels like Meta is starting to take steps towards refining the referral program as opposed to being a free-for-all. There was a point, a very brief point, where referrals weren't working for games right after they released. They were releasing like 2 or 3 days later or like a week later. That seems to have fixed itself already. I wonder if Meta's like kind of tinkering with that system. So this feels like another ploy, just like the Quest Plus subscription service, to get people back in the headsets for either cheap or free, and then hopefully they'll pick up a game later on. For the Quest Plus program, we're not seeing any new games on that, especially for games that have sequels. We've seen like the older versions, like there was an early Pixel Rip game on there, there was the first I Expect You to Die game on there, the first Fisherman's Tale. All those games currently have sequels available, so the idea was, okay, we'll hook them with the first game, hopefully they'll like it, and then they'll go back and buy the second game later. It wouldn't surprise me to see this free weekend bit go through, let's just say, Meta Connect, just so they can get more research on it. My guess is because Meta already has all your data, and they're seeing that people aren't staying in for more than an hour, so an hour cutoff for this is just fine. I know tons of people who pick up a game for cheap in like a bundle on the site like Fnatic or a Humble Bundle, play it for like 15 minutes, and then never touch it again for like a year. Meanwhile, they're guarding against people who would do what I used to do when we go to Blockbuster every weekend and just sit there for 72 straight hours and play the game. So in games like, let's just use Breachers as an example, where you can actually grind to earn money to buy new skins, new guns, things like that, or take another one of the Resolutions games like Blast On, or even Demeo, where you can earn like new player skins and new cosmetics the longer you play the game. They're guarding against players just grinding through the game the entire time, seeing everything you can see in the game, because a lot of VR games frankly don't have 72 hours of content available to them, and then just never touching the game again. So the 1 hour block is probably a good barometer for that. I'm wondering if they're going to extend that or reduce it. So let's say in like weekend 3, they drop it down to 30 minutes, which I think would be a disaster, or extend the whole thing to 2 hours. The other thing they did, and frankly, I think this is long overdue. This should have been something a long time ago. You got to do this through Amazon, but now Meta's doing this directly. Frankly, I think every gaming company that's selling hardware, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, Pico, should all do this. Now you can get the Quest 3 on the payment plan, and it goes through 2 separate plans here. Just run through the options. For the 128GB version, you could pay $24.99 a month, that's USD. That includes 2 years of Meta Quest Plus and a 2-year warranty. For the 512GB version, you pay $34.99 a month, and that also includes 2 years of Meta Quest Plus and 2 years of the warranty program. What's interesting here is that if you do the math, they're actually doing this at 0 cost. If you already had an Affirm account, which I did, that's actually what I financed my PC through, you could actually use your Affirm account to buy anything you wanted on a site like Amazon. I actually got an email from my cell phone carrier Verizon right when Quest 3 came out saying, hey, buy a Quest 3 through us and go through these financing terms. The problem is in those situations, you're actually paying interest. Now, if you do read the fine print, it does say eligible people can finance through Affirm because Affirm is a third-party lender. So they are going to run your credit and determine if you can get 0%. There are going to be people who pay some interest on this. So if you do the math, and we'll just take the 128GB version of the Quest 3, that version is $500. If you take the $24.99 a month plan, just round to $25 to make it even, times that by 24 months, you're paying $600. But if you bought everything separately, that's $500 for the Quest. Then Quest Plus is $8 a month if you're paying month to month, so that's $96 over the course of a year. That's $192 over the course of 2 years. So already you're at $692 versus the $600 you're paying on Affirm at 0%. So you're already saving money there. Add on the cost of the warranty, you're actually saving quite a bit of money doing that. If you pay for Quest Plus in a year, I think it's $60 a year. It might be $80, I can't remember if it went up. But even at $60 a year over the course of 2 years, that's $120. You're still saving the money doing financing it that way. So why are they doing this? Go back a couple podcasts ago and you'll see my report on the Quest 3S that's set to launch sometime this fall. That's supposed to be the value-driven version of the Quest 3 that should replace the Quest 2. If that headset hits the market for somewhere between $200 to $300, people are going to be more gravitating towards that as opposed to the full model Quest 3. Because the benefits you're going to get for the full Quest 3 versus the leaked specs for the 3S that we talked about a couple of days ago on the podcast are the pancake lenses, the increased resolution, and the smaller profile. The Quest 3S looks like basically a Quest 2 with a different camera array, so that's going to be a bit bulkier on your face. But those are your only benefits, so if you're someone coming from a Quest 2 like I talked about the other day, and you're used to Fresnel lenses and that resolution, you're not going to see a massive difference unless you use an actual main model Quest 3. So it doesn't quite feel like a fire sale, but it does feel like Meta is trying to get as many of the original Quest 3s off the shelf as possible before they introduce the new cheaper model, and then people have a choice of which one they want to buy into. Frankly, Meta is already subsidizing the cost of all their headsets anyway because the goal is to get you into the ecosystem so you'll buy their software. It's the same model that Nintendo uses. Nintendo loses money on every Nintendo Switch they've ever sold. The idea is to get you in there because they know you're going to buy games, and games is where they make their money, especially since the gaming industry has mostly moved to like digital copies, so they're saving money on like the manufacturing of physical copies of games. If everything's digital but they're keeping it at the same price, they're making more profit that way. Speaking to someone who doesn't really have $700 or $800 lying around all the time, let alone like $1,000 for a more high-end headset, financing options like this are a godsend. I hope Valve does this for like their Index or whenever they release their next headset in, I don't know, 2035 or whenever that happens. I think Pimax should do this. I think Varl should do this. Anything to make it more affordable for people to get into your ecosystem is going to be something that I think all these companies should do, because not everyone wants to charge that amount to their credit cards or have that amount in their bank account up front to be able to shell out that amount of money. Part of the reason why the Quest 2 has been so popular, frankly, is the price. The other day when we talked about the Quest 3S and like the different product lines that the Quest is going to have, we also looked at Somnium VR1 and the Pimax Crystal. Both of those are going to have tier systems where you can buy a headset for as cheap as $600 and as low as like $4,000. But if you could finance the higher end model, you might be more inclined to pay, let's say, $30 to $40 a month for the higher end model versus buying the base model, because that's the one you can afford because you don't have that much cash up front. So really, I think every gaming company should be doing this. Financing options should be available for any company that's selling hardware because ain't nobody got hundreds of thousands of dollars to just shell out right away. Before I sat down to record this podcast, I actually went to test to see if I could do it for Apple Vision Pro because I didn't even think about even trying to finance that headset. I just saw $3,500 and went, absolutely not. There's no way I'm doing that. Before you even get to the buying screen, you have to actually scan your face with an iPhone app so you can get like your IPD setting and figure out what strap that you're going to use for the headset. So I couldn't see if you could finance a Vision Pro, but if not, Apple needs to do this too. We're in a recession right now, at least here in the States, and no one has that kind of money lying around to be buying new tech as much as we badly want it. I would love to have an Apple Vision Pro and a PlayStation VR 2 and the Valve Index and the Pimax Crystal and the Somnium VR1. I'd love to have every single headset that ever comes out, but ain't nobody got the money for that. I couldn't even afford the computer that I bought that I'm recording this podcast on. I had to finance that. So yeah, more companies should do options like this. It's a win-win. And there are going to be people who take advantage of this. They're going to pay like 1 month of it and then just stop paying it and start just ducking the calls from bill collectors and debt collectors and try to keep the Meta Quest 3 indefinitely. Now, Meta themselves is not about to get their lawyers involved in it, because the way these programs work is that a firm actually pays the cost up front, so Meta's already made their money, and then you're actually paying a firm directly for the cost of your Quest 3. So if you keep it without paying, it's a firm that's going to come after you and not Meta themselves. They're like a level removed from that. Again, I would like to see other developers go this route, especially the ones making those high-end headsets like Somnium, like Pimax, like Varro, the ones that are making headsets in like the thousands of dollar range. The ones that are making the headsets that cost $2,000 or more, those headsets are more for hardcore enthusiasts who are willing to shell out that much money for it. But if you offer financing terms, you could get more casuals or someone like me who I would love to buy a more expensive headset. I just can't afford all that up front. That's a wrap for this episode. You get Live Open Daily on Apple, iHeart, YouTube, and Spotify. Also check out my other podcast, the XR Remix Podcast, and check me out on Twitch. I stream VR there several days a week, twitch.tv/liveopenmic. Thanks, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.